G'day, I'm Duke, and today I'm going to show you 5 tips for learning new chords. My first tip for learning new chords is once you've got the shape in the right spot, or your fingers on the right frets, what you want to do is check each string individually to make sure that they're sounding nice and clear and that there's no fuzzy notes or muted strings happening. So I've got this G chord right here. I'm going to check each string individually. We can hear that they're all sounding really nice and clear. So what you want to look out for is if there are any notes that might sound a bit muted like that, or a bit fuzzy. By checking each string, you'll be able to identify which string is causing the chord to sound a little bit funny, and then you can address that. My second tip for learning new chords is to be as close to the frets as possible. You don't want to be sitting in the middle or far away from the fret. You want to be right up next to it, as close as you can get, pretty much without being on top of the fret. Now, if you're on top of the fret, it'll sound a bit fuzzy. So you want to be right behind the fret. And you want to be right behind the fret because that's where you'll get the clearest note out of the string, and you won't have to push as hard down either, because that's where the string is ending, right here. If you're further in the middle, you'll have to push a little bit harder, and because you have to push a bit harder, the string's going to bend more and it might go a little bit sharp. If your guitar's set up properly, it probably won't, but it could happen, especially if you've got a high action. And if you're too far back, the note's going to start to get buzzy and you'll have to push quite hard to get a note out of it. Now, of course, with chords, you can't always do this, like let's say with the A chord. Here you can see my first finger is having it cannot possibly be right up next to the fret. So that's a compromise, and we just have to deal with that by getting as close as we can, and I'll just have to push the slightest bit harder with my first finger. Cool. So that's tip number 2, be as close to the frets as possible. Tip number 3 is to mute strings that you are not using in the chord. So I'll just go to the D chord for an example. And this one, I'm only going to be wanting to strum the A string, D string, G, B, and E. Now, of course, if I'm going to be doing some intense strumming, it's going to be pretty difficult to miss the E string. And then be able to hear that E string in the chord, and it'll make it sound a bit yucky. And I don't want to have to worry about missing that string all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my thumb up over and I'm going to mute that string. So now I can strum all 6 strings and not worry about having to hear that E note over the D chord. So that was the thumb muting the string. So if I want to mute other strings, I'm going to have to use my fingers. So I'll show you a minor shape bar chord starting on the 5th string root. Now what I'm actually doing here is I'm using my first finger. It's just slightly touching that low E string. How I'm muting that one. Now it's it makes the bar a bit awkward if I'm going to use my thumb over the top of the neck. So this one, I just have my first finger touching like that, and now I'll show you a power chord in the same position. Now with this one, I'm going to want to mute this string, the E string, and the B string, and the high E string. So what I'm going to do is with my first finger, I'm going to be pushing down on the 2nd fret of the A string, the B note, and the rest of my first finger is going to be touching these strings under it. Now I'll just put my 2 fingers there on the 4th fret of the D string and the G string, and then I can strum all 6 strings, and I'll only be able to hear the power chord that I want, because the sound of the strings is masking the muted sound I'm getting from the others. So there we go, and I'm checking each individual string again. There we go. So that was tip number 3, mute strings that you're not using. Tip number 4 is going to be to arch your fingers when needed. So for example, I use the D chord because a lot of my students have a problem where their 3rd finger is muting the high E string because they haven't got it arched enough. So all they need to do is to arch that finger a bit better, a bit more efficiently and cleanly. So if you're noticing a muted string, it's usually because one of your other fingers is touching it. So this happens a lot with the D chord. Now, a way to combat this is by helping with thumb position. You can bring your thumb down the neck, and that gives your fingers more real estate to work with, rather than having your thumb up here and your fingers don't have that much room to move. So we want to be like this. For those more advanced players, I'll show you a different chord that we can try. I really like this one. It's a F major 7 first inversion. I've got my 3rd finger on the 8th fret of the E string, the C note. I'm muting the A string. I'm going with my 2nd finger on the 7th fret of the D string, which is an A note. So far we've got that. Then my pinky is going to go on 9th fret E string, which is an E note, and my 1st finger is going to slot in on the 6th fret B string, which is an F note. That's an F major 7 first inversion because the F note is not the tonic, the C is the tonic, which is the 3rd, the major 3rd of the F note. So yeah, that's an F major 7 first inversion, and then I'm muting the high E string as well. So we've got 8, mute, 7, 9, 6, mute. So, and this one, I need my 2nd finger, my 3rd finger, and my 4th finger to be nice and arched so they're not touching any of the other strings. And that way I can strum, muting this one and that one, so that way I can strum all 6 strings and not worry having to about hear those other notes. And okay, so that was tip number 4, arch the fingers. Now tip number 5 is to practice moving to those chords. Alright, so you might go and get your chord and think, oh, that's great, I can play that chord now, sounds fantastic. But in a real world song situation, just being able to play the chord on its own isn't going to be good enough, so you want to be able to practice changing to the chords efficiently. Now there's a few ways to do this. For particularly difficult chords, I've tried just taking my hand off the neck and then putting it in position, taking it off, putting it in position, and just repeat like that. So what you want to do is program your hand to move into the position before you've even put your hand on the fretboard. What you'll see a lot of beginners doing is that they'll do the one finger, they sort of put each finger down separately. You want to get to the stage where you can just go, your fingers just go instantly to that shape. So yeah, one method is just come from nowhere, put your hand on whatever chord you're playing. Another method is, if you're learning a particular chord for a particular song, you probably want to practice coming from whatever chord is coming before in that song. So let's say I'm playing a song where I've got the G chord, and then I move to the C. I want to practice going to that C chord from the G, because it makes real world musical sense to do so. Alright, bonus tip. Be smart with which fingers you're going to use for the chord. Now there'll be a few chords where you can use different finger patterns, different fingers to achieve the chord. Let's say with the A chord, I can go with my second finger on the D string, first finger on the G, and third finger on the B. And I like this shape because it feels a bit less squishy on my fingers. But some people might prefer just the very simple first finger, second finger, third finger. To me that's a bit squishy, so I don't like it, but if you do, that's fine. But it's also good to learn multiple fingerings for a chord, because let's say I'm moving from a G to E minor. Now for the E minor, it's going to be smart for me to use my first and second finger rather than my second or third finger. And this is because I can use my first finger as a pivot finger. So I've got the G, I can just leave my first finger down on that second fret A string and move to E like that. Because I don't have to move my first finger, that chord change becomes much more efficient and I can pull it off much quicker. Right, I'm going to use an example with the A chord. So let's say I'm playing a song where I go from the A chord to the D chord, or it could be from D to A. With the A chord, it's going to be smart for me to do the 2-1-3 combination rather than the 1-2-3, because I can use my first finger as a pivot finger. So from going from A chord to the D chord, I can just leave my first finger right where it is. Now, if I were to use the other position, the first finger, second finger, third finger, I'd have to lift all three fingers off to achieve the D chord. Now, that requires a lot more movement than, so thus it is more efficient. So that's bonus tip. Be smart with which fingers you're using for each chord.